Good morning. I love to talk with you sitting outside. There's just something amazing about being in nature and being around the birds, the trees, and especially if you can be near water. I guess there's something to what I've heard said so many times and what you've maybe heard before. It's written in Scripture that the whole earth, which is created by God, actually cries out and sings praises to Him, which is a way of saying that nature's beautiful and nature sings beautiful songs. And I think that's why most of us find it really relaxing to just sit by a stream or sit by a river and just hear the water, sit by the ocean and hear the waves crashing down. There's something about that we just love. Speaking of love, I love the fact that you're with us today. Obviously, I can't see you directly. You can see me, of course. Here I am with you. And this is pre-recorded, so it's not like I can interact with you at this exact moment, but I'm talking to you about a message that I prayed about and I really feel strongly about, and it's important to me that you hear this, and so that's why I'm glad that you're here. I love the fact that you have decided that it's important enough to you to become better, to learn more, that you want to watch this, that you want to tune in. So thank you for joining us today. Today I've got a message that I'm calling Better. And the idea is better is better. Better is good. Everybody likes better. I've got my notes here that I'm kind of looking at here with you while I'm talking. The idea of better is this. Every year, many people make a New Year's resolution. It's a very common thing. Right around New Year's Day, they make a New Year's resolution. However, this year was a lot different. This year, I think people made New Year's resolutions, but then things in the whole world dramatically changed in February and in March. And now here we are in the end of May in the year 2020. And things are starting to reopen. Things are starting to kind of make their way back to normal, which is good. We're happy to have things back to normal, but I think we're also wanting to make sure that it's not premature. There's a lot of uncertainties that surround us. We're not sure who to believe. We're not sure who to listen to. We're not sure is this person right or is that person right. And maybe some of us are sure, but how can you really be sure, right? I mean, unless you're a witness to whatever's going on, and so that it could be a little bit disconcerting, let's say. But I kind of look at now as the beginning of the year. The reason I've chosen to do that is because I want to make the rest of this year better for me than the beginning was. Do you want the rest of the year to be better for you? I'm sure you do. And I believe that it's possible for this year to be better than last year. I believe that's possible. It's possible. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to do that. There's a principle that we're going to talk about today. And if you apply this principle, your year can be better than last year. And the thing about a principle is that it only works when it's applied. It only works when it's done. The idea that the principle exists isn't good enough. You have to do an action to put the principle into action for the principle to work. And so that principle I want to talk to you about today, I'll start it off by asking a question. How would you describe the year 2020? How would you describe the year 2020? Think about that for just a second. Because since January, we've had a lot of difficulties. A lot of us have faced unbelievable changes in our life. And we'd like 2020 to be better than 2019. But I wonder if we're all sure it's even possible right now. So let me ask you this. How would you describe the year 2020? But if you want to be better than 2019, there's a couple things we got to look at. There's a couple of facts that we have to take into account. Number one is I have no control over what's happened so far. In other words, you can't blame me. And I'm sure that most of us watching are in the same boat there. None of us are to blame for what's happened so far this year. None of us can say that I had control over it, or yeah, I was making a choice and I chose this. It happened, and life is like that. Things happen that we don't have any control over, and we find ourselves right in the middle of it, going, okay, how did I get here and how did I get out? So we have no control over what's happened so far, and here's the other part of this: you do have control over what happens next with you. See, we have a choice. We can complain about something when it happens. We can point fingers. We could say it's your fault or it's their fault. Or we could choose to say, okay, well, I can't control the fact that I'm here, but I can control how I respond to this situation. I'm not in denial. I'm not trying to say that things are rosy and nothing's wrong here. Don't look. I'm not saying denial. I'm not saying pretend. But what I'm saying is you have control over the way you respond. In other words, if something's negative that I don't like, I can choose to complain, and I can choose to tell everybody around me how ticked off, how upset I am about it. Or I could choose to just simply say, you know what? This is happening. I don't like it. But here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I mean, and some of you might say, well, I'm going to complain. Well, complaining doesn't fix anything. If you want to fix it, you've got to do something. And if you have no control over other things, in my opinion, don't worry about those as much as what you do have control over. Of course, we could get into conversations about government. We could get into conversations about how it's our responsibility, we the people. I understand that, and I'm not saying or suggesting for us as the United States of America to become puppets or to become mindless robots that just do whatever we're told. I'm not suggesting that, because we have a system in place. Albeit there may be parts of it that are broken, and I think we all agree that our constitutional system could be certainly made, or not made, but could be carried out better by those that represent and so on. So I'm not suggesting that everyone's doing a stellar job, but maybe there's something that we could do in the sense of the way we vote. When we have conversations with people about how they vote, are we saying things that make our thoughts appealing or attractive to someone who doesn't agree? Or are we just being argumentative because we don't think they'll ever change their mind? Some thoughts to take into account there. In either point, though, what I want to talk about is better is possible. And instead of looking at everything around us that's going on politically and everything that's going on around us socially, I want to talk about what we could do individually, personally. Because I believe that the community is changed when I'm changed as a person, as an individual. The country could be changed when each individual changes first, and that change becomes contagious, and that's the best way to change anything. Jesus Christ knew this. That's how Jesus Christ changed the world. He didn't do it through a political platform. He didn't do it by being voted into an office. He didn't do it by riling up the people and saying, this is wrong, don't take it anymore. No, Jesus did it by person, by person, by person, and saying, change you first and watch the world change afterward. It's a thought. I'm not perfect, but we serve a perfect God. We serve a perfect Father. And because of that, we can take comfort and rest in his advice being good and being smart for us. There's a scripture I want to look at in John chapter 10, verse 10. John 10, verse 10. I'm reading this from the Contemporary English Version. A thief comes only to rob, kill, and destroy. I came, this is Jesus talking, I came so that everyone would have life and have it in its fullest. Jesus is saying here is that I've come so that you can have life in the fullest. I've come so that you can have life and have it in the fullest. In other words, another way to look at this is happiness. This is why I love one of the things that Andy Stanley says. As you know, I respect and look up to Andy Stanley in a big way, and we've listened to his messages before. One of the things that Andy says is that Following Jesus will make you better at life and life better. Or better, I mean, if I want to say exactly the way he says it, I'll read it right here. Following Jesus will make your life better and make you better at life. But it does. And it's not that life is going to be easier. It's not that life is going to be better just because I made a decision or a choice. But when I follow Jesus, see, that's the key word, following Jesus. We're coming back to this idea of it's a principle, applying principles. It's actions in my life. That if I do something with myself first, I can have a better life. And it's what Jesus teaches us. And I feel like I've got a responsibility today to communicate truth to you from the scriptures. And your job, that's my job, your job is to apply it. I can't, I'm not going to try and talk you into it. I'm simply going to present truth before you, and you do with it what you would like. It's your decision. Isn't that cool? It's all up to you. No one's forcing anybody to do anything. It's your decision based on what you want to do. You're in complete control of your life. It's your choice. You stand for an account for your life at the end of your life. No one else is going to answer for you. You can't blame anyone else. It's you. It's like, what did you do with your life? You can answer now. And so, to help us think this through a little bit more, before I get to the big principle, there's 4 significant areas in our life that I want to talk about. That I think that if you look, you could probably choose one of them on something that you'd like to see improve, that you'd like to see become better this year. And so let me just read these off for you. First of all, your career or your financial portfolio, your financial situation. Maybe you'd like to see that become better. What would you like to see improved in your life this year? Maybe it's your career or your finances. Is it relational? Is there a relationship that you want to see get better? Someone close to you, or someone you work with, or someone that you are friends with or want to be friends with. Physical, maybe there's something happening in your body or in a loved one and you want to see them physically get better. Or maybe you just want to become more fit, more healthy. Spiritual, that's a big one. Hopefully you do want to see your spiritual life get better. Hopefully you want to take another step closer toward God, become closer to Him in your spiritual life. So I want to talk about these. Which one would you pick? Think about it for just a second. I'm going to put them on the screen. I'll come right back to you in a second. Think about it. Which one would you pick? So as you look at that list, you're going to ask yourself, okay, how do I change that? How do I change this? How do I do this? And that's where the principle comes in. But here's something I got to tell you. Before I tell you the principle, there's an obstacle that gets in the way of our principle succeeding. There's always an obstacle. There's always something that gets in the way of us actually having true success and lasting change when it comes to a principle. And so here, let me get to the principle. Here's the principle. The principle is called the consistency effect. The consistency effect. And so what that means is that small things over time lead to big things. Small things consistently over time lead to big things happening, lead to bigger results. You've heard the saying, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. How did they build the pyramids? One brick at a time. Anything that seems overwhelming, anything that seems so impossible from where you're currently standing because it's so huge, one at a time. Any swimmer who's ever swam, a huge record-breaking distance, the English Channel or different things, they'll all tell you the same thing. They'll ask them, how did you do it? How did you do it? And they said, you get to a place where you're just focusing on one stroke at a time. And so consistent things are what make the difference. And consistency is what gets you to the finish line. Commitment, though, here's the problem. Commitment only gets you to the starting line. I can make a commitment. That's why it's not called the commitment effect. I can make it a commitment and say, this year I'm going to go on a diet. Starting this week, I'm making a commitment. I'm going to go on a diet. That's what I'm doing. But that only gets you to the starting line. That only says, okay, I'm going to take an action. So you need to have the commitment, but consistency is what gets you all the way to the finish line. Consistency is the part that keeps you going. Don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named David Bach. He wrote this book that is really interesting. And in a book, he talked about the latte factor. And he's an author that just wrote about this thing called the latte factor. And I don't drink coffee, as you know. I do have with me my orange juice, like usual. But I'm not a coffee drinker, never have been. So I don't know what latte tastes like, necessarily. But I do know what coffee tastes like. I've just chosen not to like it. But with latte, here's what he says with the latte effect. If you spend about $3.50 on an average latte, and again, this may be outdated information. Nowadays, that latte may be more like $5.50 or $6.50 or something like that. I don't know. But if you spend $3.50 on a latte each day, over time, there's something that happens. If you spend that money on the latte over time, you'll just spend the money, and it's just, you don't even miss it because it's a little bit each day. You don't think about it. But if instead of buying that latte, if you took $3.50 and put it into a mutual fund each day, and if you had an average interest rate of, say, 6%, in 30 years, you would have $106,000. So that's another way of looking at it. It's like, wow, okay, that's a lot of money. So the point is that it's not about the $3.50 latte. It's the power of consistency that can create $106,000. And for the realists who are watching this, I know a realist is going to point out, yeah, okay, but that's not getting to have a latte for 30 years. Hello, I get it. And so I'm not suggesting that everybody goes out and does this with a latte specifically, but it's a great example how a little thing over time can make such a tremendous difference. $3.50 is hardly missed in a day, in a moment. But $106,000, what would you do with that? Wow. It's the power of the small things that we often overlook. So if you want to change your life, the consistency effect means that you've got to do small things over time to equal big things. And here's something that happens to us too. When we identify an area of improvement, what we're also doing is we're identifying an area of weakness. This is where it gets us. Because by saying I've got to go to the gym, not only am I pointing out that I'm going to make a change in my life, but to my heart of hearts, to my own self, I'm admitting I've got a big weakness that I've got to fix. I've got something that I don't like about myself. And I just put it out there in the open. By showing up at the gym, I'm putting out there that, yeah, I need this. I wish I didn't, but I got to do this because I'm a loser or something like that. But this is what happens to us. So psychologically, we're putting ourselves down in a way, if we're not aware of this, and it works against us. There's a resistance to going. And maybe this is revolutionary for you. You're like, oh my gosh, I never realized that. Yeah, this is one of the things that can create an obstacle for you to achieve consistency. Because here's the fact. We all have weaknesses. All of us. There's nobody perfect. There's nobody without a weakness. Everyone has a weakness. You just have to be okay with that. Say it out loud to help yourself with this. But the problem is we have a tendency, and I do too, to hide our weakness. We have a tendency to try to hide it or to even compensate for it. And so this means rather than addressing our weakness, we're ignoring it. We're putting it on a shelf. We're putting it aside and saying, okay, I'm not going to think about that. I don't want to think about that. So we end up putting ourselves into a deeper hole over time because we'll make a commitment. We'll get to the starting line. We want to make ourselves better. But by going to the starting line, we're admitting, by going to the gym, by starting the diet, we're admitting by talking to a friend and saying, you know what, I know I shouldn't struggle in this, but I've got a problem with this. I need to talk to you spiritually. I need to get my life better in this. You take that upon yourself in a form of condemnation. And because of that, there's a little bit of negativity that's deep down inside there that's eating away at it slowly, causing you to say, I'm not sure I really want to do this. I'm not sure I want to admit my faults. I'm not sure I want to admit my weaknesses because it feels bad when I do. And I don't want to feel bad. But Paul, the Apostle Paul, has something extraordinary to say about this. The Apostle Paul, man, I could take so long and just talk about him. This is the guy that wrote at least half of the New Testament, right? He wrote so much, and there's letters that he's written that we've never even seen that didn't make it in the Bible. This is Paul, who people would argue single-handedly was like the MVP, one of the most important people that influenced, besides Jesus Christ, of course, that influenced the gospel being spread throughout the world. So Paul's an important guy. Paul is a guy who I think that one day when we meet him in heaven, that we're going to say, wow, Paul, wow. I mean, would like to meet him, would like to sit down and talk to him. What an extraordinary guy, what you accomplished. We look at all the positive things that he did, but not everything about Paul is positive. Paul's just like everybody else. He has a weakness. He talks about it in Scripture. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10, this being something that Paul is wrestling with, just like you, just like me, Paul's wrestling with his own weaknesses, hates to admit it, but he's got to, and here's what he does. Check this out. And this is the difference maker. Listen to this. 2 Corinthians 12:10. For when I am weak, I am strong. And it sounds like a Yoda thing, doesn't it? It's like, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Yes, I am. You're like, what? What the heck? You know, that's like an oxymoron. That's like saying something, you know, that's one way and then the other. I mean, there's some funny oxymorons out there, like jumbo shrimp. Jumbo shrimp. The Great Depression. The Great Depression? Oh, butthead. You call somebody a butthead. Butthead. Okay, maybe that was not so good. Student teacher. Student teacher. Okay, wait a minute. So there's a lot of oxymorons out there, right? There's oxymoron is a word where two things compete against. Two words make sense when put together, like it describes or names something, but it doesn't make sense because they're opposites. And this is what Paul is doing here. Paul is saying, when I am weak, I am strong. This is what Paul's trying to tell us. This is what Paul's trying to say. He's trying to say, listen, guys, I've got a thorn in my flesh. This is how he described it over and over. He said, there's a thorn in my flesh. And people have argued about trying to figure out what that thorn was, and we're not going to try today because I don't know. But the point is this, that he had something he was unhappy with. He had something he identified as a weakness in himself, and he never gave up on it. And how did he do so much? Despite that, how did he accomplish so much? He's telling us right here that when I am weak, I am strong. And in chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians verse 9, here's what he says. And this is him wrestling with this idea of having this weakness. He's kind of talking to God about this. This is Paul talking. But he said to me, Paul's talking about God, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I, Paul, will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. In other words, Paul's realizing that, God's saying that in order for me to be strong, I have to first become weak. There's something here. Paul's recognizing that God makes us strong through the things that we admit are weaknesses. We're not going to become strong unless we do. We'll stay the same. We'll just keep flatlining in a straight curve, not much change. But when we admit, you know what, I got a weakness. Let me put my hand up. I got a weakness. Hello. That's when we become strong. So the first thing that Paul realizes is that word boast is another extraordinary, significant way of saying admit. He's saying, admit my weakness. So Paul kind of gives us these principles, these steps, if you may, to becoming strong. to becoming better, to taking something that I don't like about myself, something I'm unhappy about in my life that I would call a weakness, and making it better. And what Paul's showing us is this right here. You're going to want to write this down. We will never believe God's grace is sufficient until we believe that we are insufficient. We'll never believe God's grace is sufficient until we first believe that we are insufficient. In other words, you got to know you need it before you're ready to accept it and take it. And you know what? It takes a strong person to admit they're weak. It takes a strong person to be humble. Being humble is not easy. People might say, "Oh, they're kind of a pacifist. They're kind of wimpy and weak." Heck no. No way. It takes a real man. You want to be a man? It takes a real man, makes a real strong person to stand down from a situation. It takes a really strong person to show self-control and say, "You know what? I do have a weakness. I'm going to admit it. I'm saying it out loud." That's strength. That's strength right there. And so Paul is showing us this. He's saying this is his secret. This is something he discovered, is that to be strong, I've got to admit that I'm weak, and I'm strong when I do it. So we're counting on God's strength in this situation, for God's grace, not my own. So it's not about just admitting your weakness. It's not about just that. You've got to go beyond that. It's not just asking for help. It's not just, okay, all right, I need help, I'm done. No, it's not that. It goes beyond that. It's receiving the strength from God every day, daily, reaching out for it, daily asking God for it. Because there's something that stops us from reaching out to God. And you know what that is? Often, a lot of times, and maybe there's somebody right now that needs to hear what I'm about to say right here. God's not disappointed with you. I think too many times we get in our head that because I've got a weakness, God's disappointed with me. That God's, it's like, well, I wish he was better at that. God's not disappointed with you. God's saying, bring your weakness to me. Let's talk about it. I want to help you. God wants to help us. He's not disappointed. He's not condemning us. So let's look at some steps here. Number one, you got to admit your weakness. Admit your weakness. Number two, ask for help. You got to ask for help. Number three, receive the help every day, daily. Receive the help daily. And then number four is pray. We got to pray and put it before God. Focus. Praying is basically focusing my heart, my mind, everything about me on God. And it's great to start out first thing in the morning. Great to start first thing in the day. Say, okay, God, today's going to be your day, not Matt's day, not my day. It's going to be your day, God. And by doing that, I'm starting off with just taking a few minutes and I'm praying to you. Even if it's only 5 minutes, 5 minutes is great. Take 5 minutes and start off like as soon as your feet come over out of the bed, touch the carpet, before they go into your slippers even. Just stop right there for just 5 minutes or even 30 seconds and just stop and go, Lord, today, will you help me to be strong? To be strong, I know I need you. I got to get better at this. I haven't got it all figured out, Lord. So I'm setting my pride aside and I am just asking you for help today, God. I'm going to turn 50 years old. Yeah, it's crazy. Half a century. My birthday is in June and I'm turning 50 years old. So that's kind of funny to me that those 4 steps, AARP. Yeah, I'm eligible. I've gotten stuff in the mail. I'm eligible for AARP now. I'm not depressed about it. I'm not upset about it. I know that it's a part of life. I know we all grow older each year. Not in denial. But it's kind of crazy that I'm looking right now at 50 years of my life. Check. What's going to happen the next 50? I don't know. But let's find out, shall we? All right, so Don't do this alone. Here's another thing. Don't do this alone. Oh my gosh, I can't say this enough. The number one problem when Christians face a problem is they try to do it alone. This is all about Paul saying, admit your weakness. Not just admitting it to God, it helps to admit it to a person, a human being. If you're married and you want to admit it to your spouse and make that spouse that person, awesome. If you have a great friend, a close friend that you want to admit your problem to or sit down and talk to and have them help you through this, awesome. Do it. Do it. You've got to have a person in your life because God created us to have life together. So do that. It's very important. One of the ways that God strengthens us is through other people. And so I want to ask you to try this. Every day, putting God first, starting out your day and saying, God, I want you to make me strong in my weaknesses. And I think we can do this together. I mean, if you start that prayer, please give me your strength today. You're summarizing the whole scripture of 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. You're summarizing that, and you're making that for your declaration for the day. Now, next week, I'm going to continue this teaching, and I'm going to go into more depth about this idea of becoming better, and it's going to add to it and conclude it next week. But I'm looking forward to June 14th. June 14th is when we plan to begin meeting together in our office location. You'll see a live service going on there, and so I look forward to seeing all of us together on June 14th, 10 a.m., the office location on Main Street in Birch Run. Our website, silvercreek.church, gives you all the information on that. Anytime you want information about what's coming up. Our Facebook page is another great way to find information about Silver Creek Church as well. silvercreek.church can be found in those locations. We look forward to seeing you in person. And when I say we, I'm talking about some of you and me. I know I've heard from many people saying, I can't wait. So guys, I can't wait to see you in person. Thank you so much for listening today. And keep your chin up. This is going to get better. 2020 is going to be better. I believe it can be better. That's what our church is all about. Leading people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. And when you enter a relationship with Jesus Christ and you start applying principles and you start following him with changing little things in your life to begin following him, your life becomes better and you become better at life. So it's awesome. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you again in person. God bless you.